Hey, thanks for joining me today. I am Leah Miller with Creative Aging Network of North Carolina. Today we're going to paint a winter scene, and what you'll need is your watercolor paper, some brushes. I have a large flat, medium flat, and a round, a small round. Paint, some water, and paper towels. So to get started, the first thing we're going to do is wet our large brush, and we're going to just put water along the top of the paper. We're going to paint a barn today. So I'm just wetting the top of my paper just with water. You kind of see when I angle it, you can see in the light where it's wet and where it's dry. So I want to get a good amount of water on there and decide kind of how this is going to be my background. When I'm putting water on now will be my background. So I think I want my land to start pretty low, and we're going to kind of have a hill. Kind of goes uphill there. So that's why I'm doing it at an angle, coming lower here and higher up here. And even though this is a winter scene, I have some sort of little things on there. Even though this is a winter scene, get a little something stuck on your paper like I just did, you can use a paper towel to pick it up. I am going to put some trees, some evergreen trees back here, or at least the implication of evergreen trees, and sky, some blue sky. So I am taking my blue paint, my lighter blue paint, and I'm just gonna lay it in right across the top, and I'm going to bring it down a little lower on this side. I think I want to add a little bit of darker blue right along the top edge. And we're just letting the water do the work to let that paint move around. Rinsing out my brush, and I'm just going to take my wet brush and run it right along the edge of where I added the color, just to soften that even more, let it blend even more. Okay, so that's very subtle. I'm actually going to make it a little bit darker because it's hard to see on the paper, and I want you to be able to see it there at home. So I'm just adding a little more blue here so that it will show up for you guys that are watching this. All right. All right, so we just have some blue there. I'm rinsing my brush out. And I'm going to take I'm going to use all three greens. I'm going to take this green here that has a little bit of, oh, that's white. Let's clear off that white so you'll be able to see that. Rinse that out real good. Okay. So I'm going to do my trees now. I have two different colors of green. I'm going to take my lighter one first, load my brush up, come in here, just put some of this green in various areas. It's not perfect. I'm just very wet brush laying the green into the paper. If your paper has started to dry anywhere, just add some more water. I'm actually going to put my barn maybe right about here. So I might pull out some green where I'm going to have my barn. So just dab that. It'll just be easier to go back in and add that. And then I'm just wetting my brush, and I'm just going to soften the edges here of this green. I don't want any hard edges. This is just a very loose painting. And again, I'm going to add a little more green here so that you can see it at home. It's hard to see on this paper. All right, and again, adding water just to help it blend. All right. Pull that up where I'm going to put my barn. So I have some of the lighter greens in there. Maybe add a little bit more right up in here. So I don't have a smooth edge. I have more of a hint of a tree kind of heading up into the sky up here. And you can just see I'm just adding green and I'm just dabbling it around on my paper where there's water. Trees are not smooth. They have a lot of different variations in them, so that's what we're aiming for by just dabbling the paint on there. Now I'm going to take my darker green, load my brush up with the darker green, come in and just dab that in here as well and let it blend with the green that I've already put on the paper. So I'm just stippling it on there, just touching the edge of the brush, the corners of the brush to make different shapes. And then letting the water blend it in there. You can see it's starting to puddle up over here. So all I'm doing is just wetting my brush, rinsing it off, and then I'll come back in with the corner of my brush, and you see the brush just kind of wicks up the paint so it doesn't settle there. Just wicks it right off the paper. You can also take your paper towel and just use the corner of it, and the corner will just wick up any extra water that's starting to puddle. Okay. So I still want to make that a little bit darker. So I'm going to wet my brush again. I'm going to put some water over on my palette, and I'm going to take my green. I'm going to mix a little bit of black with it. Then I'm going to come in here and really make some darker areas. Add a little bit more variation, a little bit more depth. And I'm putting the darker really down at the base of the green, down where the forest would be really thick. And then also, you can see in some areas just using the edge of my brush to let the color come up into the woods a little bit and just letting it blend. I'll rinse that, and where it's puddling, just taking my corner of my paper towel to just dab up some of that extra puddling that I don't want. It's puddling here, but I like the way that looks, so I'm leaving it for now. If it starts to move around in a way that I don't like, I will go in and dab some of that moisture away as well. So what I think I want to do, I really like what's happening here. So I may take a little bit more of my green and my black and kind of force that to happen more in some other areas just by putting my black down even heavier. So I really like that, the light and the dark contrast that it's giving. And you see I just dab it down, and then the paint starts to blur across the page, which is exactly what I want it to do. And you can turn your brush so that you see what happens when you turn your brush. And if you get too much black in there or you want to mix some more green, just load your brush up with green and tap it in there and see what happens. Then I'll pull a little bit of the extra off that's puddling here on this side and pull a little extra off that's puddling over here on this side. Just very lightly dabbing it. It'll start to blend and soften over there more. And I do like what that's doing, so I'm just leaving it. Just gonna leave it just like that. Let's see. Gonna need another paper towel. Looking at what I have here, and do I like it? Do I want to make any changes in there before I move on? I think what I may do, just to add yet a little bit more variation, is I might come in here and get my yellow ochre. And if you don't have yellow ochre in your paint palette, you can mix some yellow with just the slightest bit of brown, just a little bit of brown, and it will give you a similar look. So I'm just going to bring a little bit of this yellow ochre in and just touch it in a few places. That, you know, I have a nice bright green back there. I want to warm it up even more with just this yellow ochre. So I've dripped some yellow ochre in, and then I'm just dabbing it with my brush, you see, creating almost like a look of some more trees here that have a different color of leaf. Now, I don't quite like how tall this has gotten, so I'm going to pull some of this water off. Again, just taking the edge of my paper towel and just dipping it in as I go down the page. And I already like that better. What I may do actually is lift this up and let it run down a little bit. And I might need to do that periodically so that it doesn't puddle too much up at the top, more than I want it to. All right, so take a look at it again, see if it's what I like. I think I do want to come in here with my green and just hint it. Trees coming up out of there just by using the edge of my brush. So you see it looks like little tree branches coming up, and then if I tap it down, it'll thicken them up a little bit. And I may do the same thing over here again like we were doing before. So I don't have as much water on my brush now. Brush still has some paint on it, but it's a little bit drier than it was before. I can dip down in here and pull up some of that color and then bring it up over here while I was working. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little something down here. I'm going to make it look maybe like, could be some water, some frozen water, or a little bit of maybe some dirt, like the ice is melting, or a road. That what you'll do is use clean water. So rinse my brush, use clean water. Again, put a wash of water on here, and that will help the paint move and blend. So I'm going to use a color here so that you can see what I'm doing. So this is going to be like dirt down here where maybe a road is and the ice is starting to melt. And you can see that I just have added water so that this blends wherever I put the water. But I do want a hard edge up on this side because this is where the snow is. And we want it to look like it's snow. We want it to look like it's snow that's beginning to melt. So you can see I'm making it like if this was a puddle or some water, you would have this sort of a horizontal shape coming out to the side. And I've just used some brown, and I'm rinsing my brush out. I'm going to get some of this yellow ochre that we were using before. A little bit of water on my brush. Paint, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of that yellow ochre down here to warm it up as well. Let that blend, let the water do the work of blending that. And then we want to put a dark color, so I'm going to take my dark blue that I used up in the sky. Find a clean place on my palette. And I'm going to put a little bit of black in with it, so it's a nice, almost watery color. And I'm just going to come in here and dab it in along the sides and let it blend. Just letting it blend right along the edges of where the snow would be connecting with this earth. I think what I want to do is add a little more water. So I'm just loading up my brush with water, and I'm just dropping it down on here to see what kind of effect we get by letting that water work even harder. Lost a lot of that nice brown that I put on to begin with, so I'm going to add some of that. And again, letting that water do the work. Just leaving it like that for a few minutes. Now I can kind of step back from it a little bit and look and see if I like what I've put down there. If I don't, if I want to add any colors. See that it's really puddling up right here, so pull some of that up. If you feel like you have too much of a color, it's really easy with watercolor to take a paper towel and just tap it down, and you can see it already lightens that up a lot. You see the difference? I want to bring some more blue down here. So now I'm going to take my dirty paper towel that's damp, but I'm going to wipe out my palette because I want to put some gray shadows in here. So I'm actually going to use my medium-sized flat brush and clean water. And I'm just putting some water over here. And I'm not going to wet my paper first. I'm going to use some black. Again, I'm rinsing the black off my brush because I don't want it to be overpowering. I'm going to use my blue. And there are a few things you can do. You can actually use white to lighten this up, or you can just water down the paint a lot so that you don't get as much saturation on your paper. So I'm just watering it down, and I'm just going to move my brush along. You see there's a bit of a shadow there, and that is implying a shadow in the snow. And then my little barn is going to be here somewhere. And so I'm going to do, we want to have a shadow up here in our snow too. Of course, in front of the trees, it would be shaded because there would be shade from the trees, right? So we'll do that. May even make a little bit of a variation by just adding a little bit more blue in some areas. Now, if I touch the edge here, This is going to soften, and I'm okay with some areas of it softening. Looks nice. And this will make it look almost like this is a little ridge of snow. I'm putting a shadow right here up above it. It's a little too strong, a little too close to the color of, or the tone of that. So I'm going to just pull some of that out. Now down here, I'm not touching this color all the way down to the edge. I'm not letting it connect with this part that I painted earlier because I don't want that color to bleed. Like right here, it's bleeding. It's hard to see because it's very light, but I'm just going to pull that out with my brush, pushing that color back down a little. And I don't mind that it's softer here than the other areas, but I don't want a big, obvious sort of bleed of color right there. If you do more than one layer, it gives a little extra depth. Once this area dries down here, I can actually come in and add a little bit more shadow so it has a bit more depth. But now what we want to do is sketch out our barn. And the easy way to do this, I'm going to have an orange, make an orange barn. And I don't want this super bright orange because that's just too strong for my taste. So I'm going to take that orange and I'm going to mix some brown with it. I'm going to get kind of a nice, more of a burnt orange color. Okay, so what I have is the barn, the snow is sort of piling up. The barn is on a hillside. So we would have, let's say we would have the side of the barn here. And then the front of the barn here. And the front of the barn is going to be parallel to the bottom of my paper. Okay. And then it would come up this way. And again, the lines on the edges are going to be parallel with the sides of your paper. So come up here, and here. Oops. So this is our barn. So I'm going to do some what looks like slats. And I want to do a gray roof. So I'm going to use my black. I'm just mixing it with my brown just to soften it up a little bit. But we know the roof is going to have snow on it. So we'll come back in with white. I don't often use white with watercolors, but I thought for this demo today, we would give it a try. See how it goes. If it's terrible, I won't use it again. You can actually use wax and mask off your color when you're painting with watercolor, so you can mask off the paper so that you end up with white in the area that you're going to do your barn or whatever it is you're going to paint. I'm going to go back to my brown here, and I'm going to come in and put this in here. And we're just going to bring some gray along the top here just to fill this in. We're going to make some shadows. We're going to take some of that black and add it in. We had done a shadow there. We'll have a shadow here as well. So this would all be shaded from the roof, let's say. A little bit on this side. Get this edge of my barn where I want it to be because I want to have a little far on that side. Yeah, there we go. And then this would come down here. And what I'm going to do is pull out some of this color. This is where the roof line would be. So I'm pulling some of that color out just by taking a clean brush and pulling the paint off of it. So I've done that. So now I can take my paper towel and just press it down and it'll pull up some of that color. Okay. It's a big difference. Of course, it pulled up this color and I didn't want it to, so let's paint that back in. So I'm going to soften this shadow on this side so it's not a harsh edge. That shadow would match that ridge line, that roof line. And this one would match that roof line. So, rinsing my brush out really well. I'm going to get white paint. Let's give this a try, see what happens. Loading up my brush. I have a little bit too much water in my brush, so I'm going to pull some of that water out by dabbing it on the paper towel. And then loading my brush up with white, and let's see what happens. Well, it does just like a milky color on top. Interesting. So we'd have to do several layers of this for it to actually cover. And we can do that. You can see it's helping over here. But what we can do so that it doesn't show up so strongly, because we have this green back here, the easy way to fix that is to take the green that we used before. We'll do a wash. A little bit of green, a little bit of black. And then if we come in and fill in the whole barn with that color, it won't look like you're covering over something you didn't want to have there. All right, so then we have a really dark barn. So for our roof line, we just want to add a lot more of the dark color for the shading. Really make that stand out. And then again, down this way. And along this side. Then if we do lines down like this, it looks like the boards of the barn. And the roof looks all right. I don't mind it like that. It looks like snow with some shadows on it. I am going to do one thing to the roof line on the left side, because it looks like it's gotten a little bit lost. And that is just come in and make it a little more visible. Really show that roof edge, and the same thing here. You really have a nice long roof edge. All right. I actually don't like that there, so I'm going to pull that back out a little bit. What I want to do now is add more shadows in the snow, and then I'm going to put a little more depth back here in my trees. So I'm going to take that black, mix a little blue with it. And a little more water. And I'm going to come in here and make sure I have the shadow where this barn is, because this would be nicely shaded. Even without any sun out, you're still going to have shadows. And I'm also going to let these shadows go right up to the edge of the woods, because again, that part would be darker. Now you just kind of move back a little bit and take a look at what you've done. Is this how you like it? Does it look how you want it to look? I think I want this part to just be really shaded, like it's right up there next to the edge of the woods. So we want it to be nice and dark. I am going to do, as far as the snow, I'm going to leave that like it is. And I'm going to come in and add a little bit more dark in my trees. So I'm taking my medium-sized brush. I already have black here on my palette. I'm going to add more black. Going to add more green, more of my dark green. And come in here and really deepen up these colors. Just by adding it straight. Haven't wet all that again. Just really adding it right in there. And then I'm going to take my small brush, a little round brush, and I'm going to come around the edge of this with clean water and just soften those edges. And black mixture, taking my little round brush, clean water, just going right around the edge to soften that edge. It still provides some variation. When that feels too dry, I'll come in and soften that up a little. All right, put that back in there. Now I'm bringing this right down to the edge of where I had painted my trees before. Green and black. I want to add a little bit more up in here. While that's wet, I'll do that. Taking my round brush, clean water, not too much water. Coming around the edge, just to soften this edge, just to blend it. So I want this background to be really soft, almost dreamy in its softness. And just soften up those edges. And I'm just going to use the edge of my brush and just pull this up. Still a little bit of softness in there. Still wet. Just pull these colors up a little, as if there are some branches back in here, some tree trunks. I am going to add some more white. I want to see what happens if we load this brush up with white and put some more white paint in here. If you want to add a little color to it, you actually could take a little bit of red paint, a nice old red barn, and just pull some red down, a bit of a red wash down here. And don't put it over the whole thing, just in areas. And it looks like a really old, worn out barn. looks more natural when you do it like this afterwards than it would if we just painted it red to begin with. It would look, if we painted it red to begin with, it would look like a fresh, newly done barn. We're going for a nice old weathered barn. So add just a little bit of red in there, and it gives it a little extra color and pizzazz. I'm going to add a door onto this side. You can see where we have just these lines coming down. It's going to be a very simple door. I'm going to take my black paint, a little bit of my brown, my dark brown, a little bit of my reddish brown, mix those up, and make a nice brown color like we were using before. And I'm just at the same angle as the roof, just putting a mark there. Come straight down here. So that's just the outline of a door. And I'm just going to dab this off a little bit. So I want to do some little lines down to make it look like there's pieces of board that come down. Now I don't want it to look like it's just sitting there separate from everything else. So I've wiped my brush again, and I'm just going to dab it just to pull some of that paint off because I don't want a solid line there. Okay, so now we have a little door. And then the last thing I might do is take my little round brush and add more shadows right here outside the door so that it looks like someone's actually been walking, coming and going into the barn. Little darker areas. And I don't want it to be perfect, just kind of modeled, little modeled area. And again, just mess around with it until you have it how you want it. You can see if we just put some shapes there, it kind of looks like there's been somebody traipsing through the snow to get into the barn. You can make any snowy painting look even more snowy by taking just a little bit of acrylic paint and mixing it with water. If you have an old toothbrush, that works great, or you can take a brush with stiff bristles, water down your acrylic paint, mix it up really good and load up your brush really good, and then you can tap like this, or I like to just use my finger and flick the paint from the brush. You have to add a little more water. It needs to be pretty wet. Not too wet because you don't want big giant drips. So you can get closer, you can lift up far away, and you get different effects. So I recommend practicing this on a scrap piece of paper, a dark piece of paper, so you can actually do it with any color just to get a technique of what you want, how you want it to look. So you see? Then you have like a snowy scene. Thanks for joining me today. I hope to see you again.